Is America rejecting capitalism or rejecting Trump? This Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern, Politically Conscious examines the rise of Zohran Mamdani and Abdul Saeed. Is socialism gaining ground in America, or is the Trump administration fueling the very movement it condemns? No propaganda, just perspective. Watch live at youtube.com/mental dialogue. If you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us. What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 81 of Politically Conscious. We are back in this thing with my brother Emil Bryan as well as Leo Smith as we react to various clips from around the internet and try to give it to you straight, no chaser. Let me introduce our political experts so we can get started with our first clip. Emil, if you will, give them the short version of who you are so we can get these clips going so I can get y'all in and out of here today.
Emil Bryan, I am an author and political consultant. My job is to advise my clients to tell the truth, tell it early, and tell it often. Bad news does not get better at time, and voters need all the information they can get in order to make an informed and intelligent decision. If you don't like that, don't work with me, because I'm going to encourage you to give it to them straight, no chaser.
And unfortunately, I would have imagined you out of business with the way politicians acting right now. But Leo, if you will, tell them who you are, and we're going to get started with our first clip, brother.
Leo Smith, former Republican National Committee strategist, former Georgia GOP exec, and the founder of Engaged Futures Group, which is government relations, public affairs, and civic engagement, a company that I started when I was working for the Republican Party.
All right, good stuff. And let me announce this as well. Emil comes to y'all from the left side of things on this thing we call politics. My brother Leo comes from the right side of things. I attempt to moderate from the middle. I'm pretty sure my audience says, I don't know if you're right in the middle or not, Montoya. But, you know, I can admit that. But I try to come from the middle of this thing. But anyway, let's get started with our first clip. And that's our tagline. If you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us. So just so if you're first time watcher, we're sharing these clips not because they're our opinion. We're going to give you our thoughts on what's real and what's not inside of the clip. So we'll start with this clip first, as we were discussing this thing we call socialism. It's the big term that's running around in it. Running around again. This term, we've heard it before, but it's big again at these times. So let's start with this clip here and get our experts' reactions. 1 second for me to pull it up. All right, here we go.
Republicans are going to make you the poster child for the Democratic Party.
Let them. We don't have to ask ourselves what life looks like if a socialist wins.
For once, Zohran Mamdani is telling the truth. We don't have to ask ourselves what life would look like if a democratic socialist won an election. Just look at New York City. The rent control measures that Mamdani promised and has put in place haven't worked. The 3 buses he swore he would deliver haven't materialized. The city's Jewish population is now massively against him because of his proven track record of anti-Semitism. And shortly after he assumed office, nearly 20 homeless New Yorkers were found dead in the streets after having frozen to death. But in fairness, that is pretty much in keeping with the track record of socialist hell states. When people don't have access to basic necessities and can't afford to heat their homes, deaths in the cold can be pretty common, as we saw in the Soviet Union. New York's socialist experiment, shockingly enough to anyone with a basic understanding of history, isn't working. But by all means, if Mayor Mamdani wants to pretend that it is, then let him. Let him become the new face of the Democratic Party, and let the party be inescapably associated with a failed ideology that just won't die, no matter how many times it's proven wrong.
Leo, we'll start with you. Your response to that was National Review's perspective on Mayor Mamdani, who's in a sense become the face or potential face of the Democratic Party when his, in a sense, mayoral win kind of, in a sense, surprised America, if you will. But as we asked at the beginning of the show, is this simply a backlash to what's happening to the Trump administration? So I put a little extra context in there just for you to give me your thoughts on the context I added plus the clip itself. Go ahead, brother.
Well, you know, I like to go to the polling. And so Mamdani is the result of American changing ideas on capitalism and how they see opportunity and how it should exist in America. And that was damaged because of basically corporate greed. And so now that we've had such an extreme view of how capitalism does harm, people are looking for a positive way. So Mamdani is basically created a capitalist socialist kind of blend of a lab in New York, and we're still waiting for the results. I would not jump as quickly, even as a conservative, jump as quickly as that gentleman did for the National Review, a conservative magazine. However, it is fair to ask, is America really throwing away the idea of capitalism? I don't even think Mamdani is doing that. When he talks about creating grocery stores that are more affordable and germane to local communities, that's still free enterprise. So I think that what we're talking about is, while Americans, according to Gallup, have an 83% approval of free enterprise, right? Which even some democratic socialists can support free enterprise activity, and then again, Trump is not doing free enterprise. He's actually doing socialism for a few friends and elites. So, and more than free enterprise. There's no competitive bid process going on in the Trump arena. But at the same time, Americans only have 53% favorability towards capitalism. And amongst democratic socialists and Democrats and progressive, that number is more highly unfavorable. So that's where we are. Mamdani is riding that wave. And I think that he is the best example right now of a lab that we can test these ideas.
Good stuff. Emil, any your thoughts about the clip, or like I said, just the additional context of where we are as a country when it comes to the word socialism as it relates to that clip?
Right. So first of all, you're going to hear me say this more than one time during the show if we're talking about socialism. But J. Edgar Hoover called and said he'd like his Red Scare back. Like, we've been doing this for 100 years. The first time we had the Red Scare was after the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, and from 1919 through the early 20s, the Bureau of Investigation, soon to become the Federal Bureau of Investigation, was taking down quote unquote leftist organizations as part of that Red Scare. It is not uncommon. It is a slur that has been hurled for the last century when people don't like policies like what Mamdani is doing. So let's first talk about that history. The second thing is, what he said in his commentary was a lot of hooey, and you can use out whatever word you want to, but the cows do not want what he was putting out because they already used it. So the idea that 20 homeless people died, that's a fact. The fact that it's due to his policies, no, because he just got into office during the winter. So those policies weren't even in effect. That's the first thing. The second thing he said was that, Jewish people are having trouble with him. Polling nationwide, he's running about favorable to unfavorable even. In New York City, it's about 2-1 unfavorable, but a lot of that's from the propaganda because he's Muslim, not because he's necessary, and he opposes the draconian actions of the state of Israel. So there's a lot happening in his framing of Mamdani as a socialist. By the way, socialism as a practice has not been debunked. Most of the Nordic states are more socialist or democratic socialist than they are pure unfettered capitalists. In fact, there are very few states around the world that are unfettered capitalist nations. American is not one of those nations. So anytime people say it's either socialism or capitalism, as we've often said on the show, Montoya, it's usually not so cut and dry. And Mamdani is trying to find the best line between taking care of the people of the city and allowing capitalism to run its course. That's a hard line to find. He's doing a pretty good job of it, according to the people of New York City.
So again, for anybody watching, if you're a first-time watcher, thank you both for your perspective. We just want to highlight to you how to listen for propaganda and know when you're being influenced. So anytime you hear a cut that goes to extremes, it's pretty normal to have deaths under this certain system. Like I'm saying, again, we're just challenging politically conscious to raise your consciousness so that you're not influenced, regardless of whether you're on the left or right. We're not telling you who you should be with, but we are warning you against that the media is, unfortunately, political media is so much money paid towards pushing you one way or the other. We're trying to help you weed through and not just get caught up in the rhetoric, because the rhetoric is, these like Emil said, whether he's just in office or not, the reality is, unfortunately, there's no mayor in a sense that could come in regardless of party, and if there's a super cold winter and there's a bunch of homeless people, I'm just saying the reality is you may have deaths in that situation, and that wouldn't be related to policy. So I'm just kind of walking people through, again, what we're here for. The dialogue is whether you're getting propaganda or not, and telling you, in a sense, what to weed through and listen to so that you can make an informed decision. But if you listen to the rhetoric that says, oh Lord, this is what's going to happen, anything that's pushing you towards alarm typically is propaganda. So that's kind of, again, a reminder for what this show is here for. All right, this one
Republicans are going to make
from a
you the
comedian on the
poster
other side of
child
things, and it's a
the
comedian.
Democratic Party.
Let them.
You're on mute, Montoya. Hold on. Come off mute, Montoya.
All right, sorry about that, y'all. Here's the clip from the comedian on the other side of it.
You know what Mamdani feels like to me? Is work from home. You know what Mamdani feels like to me? Is work from home. You remember work from home before the pandemic. Work from home, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. This place would fall apart as a business if we just let people work from home. There'd be no more business. Capitalism would fail. If we let people work from home, and then the pandemic hits, and then out of nowhere, everybody's working from home, and a lot of places seem to be staying open. They're even making some money. And you think back to that time in like 2019 when you asked if you could work from home, and they said no, and you were like, oh, so you're a liar. And that's what Mamdani feels like. It's like politicians could have been doing this stuff the whole time. It turns out, like, Mamdani gets in and he's like, oh yeah, there's just a button. You just have to press this button and then stuff gets done. I don't know why nobody was pressing it before me. It's not like I'm some once-in-a-generation politician. I just saw the button and I pressed it, and the button was caring. It's like you press the do something button. If you press the care button, then something will happen. I don't know why nobody was doing this before. That's crazy. Everybody was acting like the button was in the middle of the earth. You would ask them for something that they promised you. They promised they would do this thing, and they'd be like, hey, look, we're going to get the kids school lunch, all right? Under my leadership, every kid's going to have school lunch. And then they would get in the office, you'd have the party, yay, school lunch is coming. And they'd be like, you're right, school lunch is coming. And then like 6 months into their term, you'd be like, hey, about that school lunch. And then the politician would be like, oh, okay, so you see, I tried, but it turns out children don't like to eat. Like, they would just... You'd be like, there's no way that's true. What are you talking about?
All right, Emil, I'll let you respond. Obviously, that's a comedian's giving context of obviously favor for what Mamdani's doing in New York. And there are people who are in favor and have their own testimonies for what they like being done. But any thoughts, again, about, I think Leo gave us a fair assessment. The lab is being viewed upon. We're watching it right now. That's the real context. But any thoughts? Again, just a funny way of looking at the Mamdani.
It is funny. And one of the problems is a lot of people in New York City, if you just listen to the polling and you listen to some of the anecdotes from people around the city, they're saying it. Like, for instance, when his crews, the New York City crews, filled their 100,000 pothole, or when people call and report a problem and it's getting fixed the next day or within a couple of days, they're like, you mean the resources have been here all this time? Because Mamdani didn't shepherd in a new era of public works. All of those infrastructure, all that infrastructure was there. It's just now being targeted and used more effectively, according to a lot of the people in New York City. So what Josh Johnson is talking about, which I think is hilarious, is all he did really was just push the carrot button, and things began to happen. And that's kind of the point that I think Mamdani is illustrating in his short time as mayor, that if you really care about the people and their concerns, the infrastructure is here to deal with it. Now, we'll see about some of the more controversial things he's going to do, like the grocery stores and stuff like that. But in terms of what's already transpired in the city, Josh Johnson kind of makes fun with, not fun of, the fact that so much can be done with the existing infrastructure.
Leo, I would offer, for the things that Emil pointed out, that would be a good example of what I'm getting with my vote. Because we always talk about on this show, not people really don't have a context of what they should be getting with their vote. People assume that they're getting nothing when the vote is literally delivering a lot of things that are necessities or simplicities, actually. But clearly, if you're experiencing what Emil's talking about, where these things seem to take forever, and now you're seeing them get done, now you have a picture of, okay, this is what I get with my vote. But go ahead, Leo, your thoughts on that clip?
No, I mean, what we have to, look, just to be frank, Mamdani's leadership and being administratively effective at being the executive in charge of New York City, it's been good so far. I'm a conservative. I'm not a fan of Mamdani, but I can say that he started out doing something that pretty much all effective politically charged executives have done. Take care of something that all people can see, something as simple as potholes. Left or right, there have been mayors, governors, etc., who have said, one thing I'm going to get right is I'm going to fill up the potholes. So Mamdani has started with the easy. So it's not that he's discovered a new button, but potholes have always been an easy button, to be quite honest with you. And some have cared more than others. So let's just give him an A for doing a basic. That is a basic delivery. But that's not what he promised in his campaign. We got to remember that he talked about free this, free that, $30 minimum wage. He talked about arresting, Netanyahu. These are so just like Emil sort of alluded to, we really haven't gotten to the stuff that is the democratic socialist stuff. There's nothing democratic socialist about filling potholes, right? Republicans say that and do that as much as Democrats do. So we still are in a situation of wait and see. A lot of the things that Mamdani promised his DSA followers and progressive liberals in New York City, he really hasn't implemented that stuff yet. He's scaring a lot of people into moving to New Jersey, but otherwise he hasn't implemented.
I'm laughing because, the super rich haven't really exited New York City the way they threatened they would if he won. They're still there. The structure of New York City elite is still there. It's not going anywhere yet. I always laugh. I say, and Mamdani comes from the same school I do. If they want to go, let them go. The vacuum will be filled. I am a big believer in capitalism's creative destruction. And if somebody says, I'm leaving, if a market is unserved, it will be served. That's the beauty of capitalism. And that's not something that someone like Mamdani or the DSA folks eschew. They believe in using the free market to serve the people in the community. The question is, how do they do that, and what regulatory environment is there? But in terms of people just bouncing, it's not really happening the way that it was forecast.
Yeah, absolutely. We got a couple of comments. Here's one. I'll let y'all kind of respond to both of them. Here's one from George P. Brooks. Brother says, capitalism is meritocracy. Socialism is a handout. I'll let just one of y'all respond to that one. Then we'll do another comment.
We say on this show, and we emphatically say it, that making one thing an extreme is never how reality works. So saying capitalism is a meritocracy and socialism is a handout, the world is not black and white. The world is not left and right. The world is not blue or red. The world has gray. It has different striations and variations. So as far as I'm concerned, America is neither a meritocracy nor capitalistic exclusively, because I can look at the administration and tell you right now, meritocracy is not happening.
I would agree with, look, I'm a free enterprise conservative who believes in capitalism and the moral righteousness of capitalism. I think capitalism spurs morality and is compatible with morality when done properly. We're not doing capitalism right because, when you talk about Mamdani's proposal for city-owned groceries, that's socialism. That's like saying the government should own a free enterprise business, and that destroys the competitive market, etc., destroys innovation, etc., 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 gives the government way too much control. But one could argue that Donald Trump is running many government White House-owned corporations that's controlling.
So that's coming in the show. That's coming in
right.
the show.
I mean, so I got to be honest. I'm not. I'm not a Trump Republican. I'm a real conservative.
I feel you. I respect it.
So I agree that socialism is all about giving away free stuff, and that's not good. But at the same time, I'm saying Trump is also giving free stuff to his own people.
Let me give y'all one more comment, then we get to another clip. This one comes from Kenny77. He says, "This is ridiculous. People do not study history. We tried unbridled capitalism, and it was called the Gilded Age of robber barons, and it was disastrous. It led to the Great Depression of the 1930s. Leo, I'll let you respond to that one, then we're going to play another clip."
No, I agree with him. I mean, and Trump was open about it. He wanted to bring the Gilded Age back, and he is absolutely doing it, enriching himself and his internal group at our expense. We pay through taxes. He takes our taxes and uses it for his own personal gain. As a conservative Republican, I am against that. And so let me just be clear. There's no true conservative who is for what Trump is doing.
Fair enough. All right, let's get to this next clip.
If your solution to our problems is to embrace socialism, then you are historically illiterate, unintelligent, and therefore dangerous.
This guy has something on his face. Oh. He's also...
If your solution to our problems is to embrace socialism, then you are historically illiterate, unintelligent, and therefore dangerous.
This guy has something on his face.
So right now, I'm having technical difficulties with the way I'm maybe have to go back to the old screen. It sounds like it's not starting at the beginning of the clip, which is killing some of the context. Are y'all catching that? I can't hear you. I can't hear you, Emil. You're on mute.
The clip didn't make sense, right? It's whatever context you were trying to create.
Where it doesn't play, but this happened with both the first two clips. It's not playing the beginning of the clips. Let me try to set the screen up different and see if I can, if it'll do better. Because it's the whole, it's kind of missing the context if it's missing the beginning of the clip. All right, let's try this again. Let's try this one more time. Sorry, y'all that's watching. We haven't had, this is a new problem right here. All right, hopefully it starts at the beginning.
If your solution to our problems is to embrace socialism, then you are historically illiterate, unintelligent, and therefore dangerous.
This guy has something on his face. Oh. He's also an idiot. According to that very ugly gentleman, socialism is un-American, when in reality, socialism built the America MAGA claims they want back. America was great between 1940 and 1970, primarily because the highest union membership ever, the smallest wealth gap ever, and we grew the biggest middle class ever. These things weren't built only by free markets. They were built by Glass-Steagall, the Wagner Act, Social Security, the GI Bill, the wealthiest earners being taxed over 90%, all things that really, really ugly man would consider socialism. That socialism is what dragged us out of the Great Depression and helped create the greatest economic superpower of all time. So when politicians like Mamdani, other democratic socialists, and even democratic centrists and moderates who are now starting to move further away from their corporate interest, they're not implementing something foreign to this country. That's our version of Make America Great Again, minus the racism.
So, can I comment on that?
Let Emil start on this one because I'm flip-flopping y'all.
Yeah, no problem. So, Montoya, this is the challenge that a lot of Americans have: is they want the public works and the services that quote unquote socialism provides, but they don't want to call it socialism. They want to call it capitalism or free enterprise. We live in a community, and the community prospers when some of our tax dollars goes back to the community in the form of roads, bridges, infrastructure, rail, electricity, and those kinds of services. No one does not want a fire department. No one does not want a police department. We may argue about the form police takes. We may argue about the form or how they investigate crimes, but we're not arguing that we need police. We're not arguing we need fire. We're not arguing we need roads, bridges, and all those infrastructures. Where we have a legitimate disagreement, which is why people struggle with the socialism word, in my opinion, is from what this dude was saying. Because he makes that blanket statement instead of saying there's nuances and there's ways that we did it. So the gentleman who was initially speaking with the beard was saying it's bad. The brother was telling you, here are all the things that have happened that could be called socialism. We don't call them socialism. They're just programs that help the public. So we have to have a much more nuanced discussion than socialism bad, capitalism good.
All right, Leo, let me say a little context and let you jump into your thoughts. And again, this is us again trying to be politically conscious. The reality is there is a propaganda behind the word socialism, regardless of what side you're on. Like there's a lot of propaganda, and we're saying this for those watching. If you're hearing the word socialism and you have an attachment to it, whatever the attachment, whether it's good or bad, more than likely at this moment, you've been listening to too much propaganda. One thing that brother did say was the term democratic socialist, which people are getting used to hearing a little more. If you recall, when the Democrats rejected Bernie Sanders, however many elections ago that was, where he was specifically running on a democratic socialist platform, specifically the word democratic socialist, which is not the same as socialism, but the established Democrats at the time used the piggyback the word socialist to push him out and not even be considered. Again, I'm not saying I'm on either side. I'm talking about the reality of what happened. They used the word socialist against him, whereas that brother that just played that clip talked about democratic socialism. Democratic socialism is not socialism. But if you've never heard that, hopefully this ain't the first place you've heard it, you will actually equate the two. They're not the same. Go ahead, Leo, make your points.
But they want you to think they're the same, because that's the game that the red pill, blue pill wants you to play. They want you to believe that, folks. And so that's why if you want the truth, listen to Mental Dialogue, listen to us, because we're not willing to play that game. I take positions from conservative right, but I'm still willing to call out BS whenever I see BS. You know me, I say what's on my mind, often too much so. So the fact is that you hear often in political jargon, straw man argument. And what's frustrating, what that really means, because sometimes people just say straw man, but they don't say what it means. What it means is that you're making an argument against something that was never true in the first place, was not the basis of the whole point in the first place. So nobody in America, not that there are people, but there are no political parties in America pushing socialism. No political parties. There's no DSA people, even the far right DSA people. There are some socialists within the democratic socialist movement within the Democratic Party. But those people have no authority, no legislative making ability, blah, 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 blah. Even those DSA candidates that are winning, they're not socialists. But there are some big mouth, loud influencers and people who are pundits, etc., social media creators who are spouting socialism. But America is not embracing that. And when polling is done on even progressive Democrats, they don't favor socialism. So we need to get past that argument and start doing what Montoya just started doing, which is, well, then let's just explain what democratic socialism is, how it's blended, what is its government might look like. Cornel West tried to do that, the academic. He tried to start educating people on that. People are so invested in the red pill, blue pill that they wouldn't even listen to him. It should have been worth it for a public intellectual to be able to explain to us what he means by it, but we weren't willing to invest in that. That's where we need to go. I'm a conservative. I think capitalism works. So let's talk about how a blended moral capitalism that cares about the people and wants to keep the baby in the bathwater. How do we do that?
Nah, great question. I got a comment here. If either one of y'all can understand exactly what he's saying, I would love for y'all to address it. This is like a new watcher, so I want to definitely prop up any of our new watchers per se. I'm personally missing it. I think he's onto something, but can you break down what he's saying?
Yeah. So the way I read this is socialism is I exist, therefore I deserve. Period. Okay. Capitalism is I work, therefore I deserve. Okay. Period. Right. So when you look at it that way, the people who believe in socialism say that you have a right as a human being to certain things, period, right? Just for existing as a human being. People who believe in pure capitalism say if you don't work, you don't eat, right? And those are the extremes of those views, but that's kind of where this comment seems to be born.
Right, and that's a fair comment. Just explain it. So he or she, I'm sorry, I don't know if you're male or female, kindly say, Junior. I'm sorry if I can't say your name right. But either way, great comment. Thank you for the comments. Y'all keep them coming. All right, here's another clip as we move to Abdul El Said. He's the Democratic nominee in Michigan right now. So here's a clip with him on Fox News. It's a little longer than we normally play, but I thought it was worth playing the end. I may cut off a little bit of the end, but let's play this because it's kind of a full picture at his dialogue with Fox News.
Both played football and lacrosse. We both love America. We both love freedom. And I'm looking forward to the conversation.
You want to abolish ICE? Who's going to deport the criminal aliens?
Long before we ever had ICE, we had INS. We were able to enforce our immigration policies without shooting people in the face and the back of the head.
Green New Deal. Do you drive an electric car?
I drive a plug-in hybrid made right in the United States. The bigger question about cars, though, why the president just escalated a trade war with Canada. It's about to make all of our cars, especially the internal combustion engine cars, so much more expensive. I also think we got to start taxing wealth for people who have over $100 million. I mean, at that point, like, what do you think are you going to do with more money?
What are you going to do with more money? Whatever I want.
The question ultimately is, do you want to drive on good roads, or would you rather have a billionaire make a second billion? That's what Mike Rogers wants. That's what Donald Trump wants. Apparently, that's what you want. I think the people in Michigan want something different. They want good roads and good schools. I thought you were for the everyday man. Like, if you're for billionaires more than you're for every other person, well, you and I are just going to disagree.
No, I just think I have the right to the fruits of my own labor.
Billionaires don't make their money off of their labor. Billionaires that make their money off their money. So if you have $1 billion, your billion makes another 100 million. That's not the fruits of your labor. That's just the fruits of your money making money. Like, if we tax you at 7%, you're still gonna make what, a cool $30 million off your $1 billion? I think it's okay.
You say you want socialized healthcare. Abdul, how much is that going to cost?
It's going to cost the average Michigander a whole lot less than they pay right now. Substantially less for an everyday person who's out here who can't afford their healthcare and worried about losing their healthcare with their job. Well, I just don't see why you're so on the side of the billionaires, Jesse, rather than on the side of everyday Michiganders. You want to talk about budgets? I'm happy to do that. The guy who used to work on your channel, I think he was like the 6th host on the 5, he wanted to raise our military budget to $1.5 trillion, and you don't seem to be upset about that. So we could fight a war we don't know how to get out of, to raise our gas prices $5 a gallon? I just think that we could do a lot better with our money, Jesse. Everywhere I go in Michigan, people are talking about the fact that they've never had to worry as much about life being as unaffordable as they say right now.
The war. Are you glad the Ayatollah is dead?
Yeah, I mean, look, he was a terrible person. The bigger question is, should we have gone to war in the first place? Probably shouldn't be fighting wars we don't know how to get out of. The issue that people are worried about is not that somehow somebody's going to come and push Sharia law on them. The issue in Michigan is people are worried about how they're going to afford their gas. How am I going to see a doctor when I get sick? How am I going to keep my job? Honestly, you guys love to play this culture war game where you use these words that sound really foreign to avoid actually having to talk about the issues. We all agree that Mike Rogers is a beta. The guy's a beta, doesn't like to answer questions, and he dodges every debate. If the only answer that Mike Rogers and Donald Trump and J.D. Vance have to this economy is to point to me scary words associated with him, those scary words are not raising gas prices or keeping you from seeing your doctor. I'm interested in getting money out of politics, putting money in your pocket, passing Medicare for all.
75% of the country likes the health care coverage they have.
No, 75% of the country wants guaranteed health care through Medicare for all.
Sex changes for minors. Do you support that?
If you disagree that health care decisions need to be made by a doctor, parents, and a patient, then we think we agree to disagree.
So you think it's okay for a parent to slash his kid's thing-a-ling off?
Do you really want to have this conversation? Are you circumcised?
Yeah, Yeah, but I mean, that's a
Jesse, are you?
personal question.
Okay.
Doctor.
So you probably should want to move on.
Boys playing in girls' sports.
I'm not advocating. You have not asked me one time about the issues that people actually care about in Michigan. You don't want to talk about gas prices. You don't want to talk about groceries. You don't want to talk about healthcare. You don't want to talk about this stupid trade war. You can keep doing the greatest hits if you want.
It's a big issue.
I'm interested in getting money out of politics, putting money in your pocket, and passing Medicare for all. The decision of who gets to play what sports ought to be decided by the people who govern sports. I'm running for U.S. Senate. I'm out here trying to take on the healthcare crisis.
Jesse Waters just got a can of whoop ass open on him. He sounded like he was the dumbest dude chosen for his looks and his smile, that he has zero intellect. He's the worst person for that interview. Abdul El Sayed just ate his lunch on every moment there in that clip. I'm sure that clip was edited and mixed, but the fact is that you can see the conceding giggle and laugh that Jesse Waters would say, oh, my script of comedy that I'm supposed to do on my news channel, my comedy script is not really cutting the mustard and arguing against these things that this guy is saying. And because he was just rebutting the nonsensical talking points that a Jesse Water makes his money from just by being extreme against rather than actually being rational. I would have rather that Fox News' Brett Baer done that interview. I don't take Jesse Waters seriously, and I hope you guys don't either.
Emil, your thoughts about that clip?
So this is where we're going to kind of see the electorate decide what's really valuable. The Republicans have been really good at winning the culture wars, and they can put these hot point issues in front of people. But at the end of the day, solving those doesn't put money in pockets, doesn't make gas lower, doesn't make people's electricity more affordable. These are real issues that Abdul El Sayed is putting out there, and he's saying, I want to solve these problems. I want to address them. And you saw Jesse Waters, to Leo's point, who is as deeply unserious as anyone can be on Fox News, try to bring him back to the culture wars, and he's refusing to fight them. And that's going to be what the electorate's going to have to decide. Do I want to continue fighting these culture wars, which, having fought them for the past decade, haven't really changed the outcomes that are important to me? Farmers are finding that out right now. They're not changing the outcomes, right? Cattle's at an all-time high. The cattle herd head count is as low as it's ever been in the last 20 plus years. There's got to be a better way. And Abdul El Sayed is bringing up the topics that voters tend to say they want to hear about in the polling. So is it going to be culture wars, or is it going to be substantive issues? For the last 20 plus years, culture wars have actually been winning, and substantive issues have taken a back seat. So we're going to see if that shifts.
And here's where we're at right now. Again, we're politically conscious, trying to raise your consciousness. It is literally the battle of what you just said: culture war versus the substantive stuff. And the reality is, the culture war has been so effective that it's still going to be driven down your throat, and because it's been so effective. And let me make that clear for anybody watching. When I say effective in how either political party uses the culture war to keep you on their side to vote as they would have you vote. What happens is, while we, as the electorate, would love to hear the substantive stuff, the reality is sometimes explaining that doesn't make us come out and vote, one, for a matter, or two, actually makes a difference on whether you will vote or not. So the culture war is played up because we, as the electorate, fall for it. I'm not calling us dumb. I'm just highlighting why it gets done. We can be upset about it, but we have to understand our role as the elected. And so I would highlight, as we become more informed, you will be less influenced by that type of stuff. Here's one aspect, because we are politically conscious. We want to raise the consciousness of our community. And so here's a couple of sisters, Pop and Politics. They got into the culture war part of that conversation. Here's what they had to say about it, and I'm interested in y'all thoughts, because this is something that the African American community absolutely is often concerned about, despite the substantive stuff, if I'm saying that word correctly.
it's ludicrous, not to mention it's evil.
Again, sex changes for minors. Do you support that?
If you disagree that healthcare decisions need to be made by a doctor and their parents and a patient, then we think we agree to disagree. But you want to put government inside.
So Abdul, you're a doctor, right?
No, I am.
So you think it's okay for a parent to slash his kid's ding-a-ling off?
Are you circumcised?
Yeah, but
move on. You probably should want to move on.
Circumcision's different than castration.
I think it's a problem that you think that you get to decide what happens between a parent, a doctor, and a patient. And I'm just saying that, yes, circumcision is surgery on a kid's ding-a-ling. So if you really want to bring that up, you can. I just think you guys are really selective about how you want to talk about these things.
Abdul, Michigan's not going for that.
All right, we gotta unpack this. So he's now trying to equate circumcision to boys getting their penis chopped up and turned into a vagina.
So he wants us to suspend reality, basically, and come into this alter reality in his world where it's okay for children, particularly females, to have genital mutilation done on them. Female genital, that's where the world that he comes from, or the world where his religion proffers, proliferates, if you will.
The right to try is to save people's lives, to try experimental drugs. Now, we know what a castration is, right? We know what happens when they take a penis and turn it into a labia and when they make that transition, quote unquote, when they make that transition, let me tell you, it's nothing like the right to try. Nobody's life is being saved. Nobody's life is in danger with transsexual surgery. That's not any of that. That's absolutely a choice.
These people are sick. Do you hear me? He is a doctor. But there's plenty of them out here that are working, that are out here talking to our young people. You take your kid to their pediatrician and they ask you to leave the room, and you got that demon in there telling them circumcision is compared to genital mutilation or trans surgery.
All right, Leo, I'll let you respond again. And the reason, again, I felt, again, we try to look at all these perspectives, and I would offer that in the African American community, because in a sense, generally speaking, we heavily vote Democrats. This is one issue where a lot of people in the African American community are like totally against the Democratic Party, and I'll say understandably, because this is the part that they latch on to. But I will offer that the commentator say, hey, this doctor is going to be telling your child this. I think that's highly unlikely, and that's where you get into the propaganda and the fears of it. There's dialogues that can and should be had around it, but it's those type of fears that push, I would offer, the culture war into realms that are not close to reality.
Well, that's the nature of the culture war, right? The culture war is such that supporting a particular cultural ideology, which right now for progressives is to be pro-transgenderism. That's a cultural decision. That's not a policy decision. That's not a legislative decision, but they're pretending is a legislative decision because it gives the Democratic Party some power with a certain segment of people who are following that culture war. So it's played on both sides. And what it does is it leads to the extreme arguments on the other side. Personally, my son is still seeing his pediatrician. Never in the life of my child has my pediatrician said, y'all leave the room. So people lie to play the cultural war thing. And if you're being told to leave the room, then you need to find a new doctor. So unless that child then says, I want you, daddy, mommy, to leave the room, whatever. My point is that it is fair to ask El Sayed if he supports and this idea of childhood sex change. This is basically what they were asking him. He didn't answer it. And that's because he is also playing the culture war.
And he's brilliant, and he's brilliantly so. And this is the thing that I think people, when you dumb down these complex decisions, these complex human moments into do you support or do you deny, it really hurts the people who are affected by these. There are human beings whose lives are truly affected by these culture wars. These are not just topics of discussion. There are people who are being victimized. The transgender community as a community is the most victimized community in America right now. They are the victims of more violent crime than almost anyone else in this country as a group. That is because nobody is seeing them just as human. Sorry?
Add the per capita for the context.
Per capita, that's right. So people are not seeing
you got to
them
give
as
that full
human.
context on here.
Thank you very much. Right. So that's one of the challenges that we are seeing is in this discussion, we're just losing the humanity of the people who are most affected, which are the people who are struggling with these issues. So when I see that, I weep for the people whose lives hang in the balance, whether or not they're being treated like ping pong ball. And I'm saying that as somebody who's a Black man in America whose very existence has been a ping pong ball in America, whether or not I should be free or whether I should vote or whether or not I should be in jail or not for walking down the street with the wrong skin color. These are all issues that affect human beings. So when I see politicians trying to get back to the issues that affect them, and when Abdul El Sayed said, I'm running for the United States Senate, and these are the things I want to focus on, he was making it clear he does not want to go down that rabbit hole that doesn't affect the majority of Americans' lives. He's trying to make sure he's very clear what is substantive.
He's doing that and also avoiding it. We're going to call it like it is.
Is he making it clear?
He's also avoiding it because he doesn't want to turn off the culture war, like Leo said, to appeal to that group. So therefore, he doesn't want to answer for that reason. That is also part of why he's not
absolutely. I will grant that. And I will also say that avoiding it still fuels it, but it's a trap that neither side can get out of. As soon as the topic comes up, whether you answer it or not, it's a trap that neither side can get out of. You have to deal with it. And to Leo's point, not dealing with it is dealing with it, and dealing with it is dealing with it. So
no, I would disagree with dealing with it is dealing with it. I would offer that if you're on one party and there's a culture war that you're choosing to play, that's where you get the avoidance that you're talking about. I'm talking about either side that's playing it. What's rare is the politician who won't run into the culture war. To Leo's point, when you're talking about things that are not absolutely related to policy, but the culture war stuff works. So the reason we see politicians so adaptly avoid answering the question directly is because it's going to hurt them based on we're playing this culture war to appeal to this group versus a policy thing. If that
this is Montoya, this is the problem, and I'll just discuss this with you guys kind of freely. The problem is anytime, let's say Abdul El Sayed is talking about all the things that policy-wise he wants to do. The moment Jesse Waters brings up transgender issues, what does he do? That's the question that I want. How does he answer that? He doesn't. Well,
he didn't just bring up Emil. He didn't just bring up a transgender issue. He asked, "Do you believe that children should have sex change?" That's a smaller, more specific issue other than transgender.
But it's still a culture war issue.
No, you and I are not disagreeing that that's a culture issue. What I am suggesting is El Sayed didn't even answer that question. You can be supportive of support for transgenders without being supportive of changing the sex of a child before they've even reached the ability to know what their gender and their sexual preferences are. I mean, that's an easy answer. And the reason he wouldn't answer it is for the same reason that Jesse Waters is putting out cultural bullshit. And the reason is because El Sayed is also thirsty for power and control. And he wants the money and the power of being elected. Jesse Waters wants the money and power of influence, but the money from Fox News. They're both political whores.
I love it. And that's what, again,
I love the cynicism. I think I'm going to agree with you on that.
No, let's call it like it is. Because again, when we get, and there are some politicians that are doing this, and this, again, if we raise our consciousness as a society, we will finally start getting the politicians who can actually say the truth, and we can show our support for them. So again, it's kind of on us not to fall for the culture war so easily, so that we can get the type of policy. So again, I want us to own our part with our one vote. I'm just kind of keep reiterating. The more we don't fall and go out there and repeat what a Jesse Waters said, or repeat what Abdul who said when he avoided the question, if you're not out there repeating that part of it, then you're not furthering the culture war, which leads people to just say, well, I'm on this side. Oh, no, I'm on this side, versus having real, robust conversations about what really affects us as Americans. So that's
the problem is I have no clue what Al Sayed believes and how he'll act on policy in that regard. I have no clue.
Absolutely.
I have a very clear understanding. I'm very comfortable with it because he said the decisions between the parent, the patient, and the doctor. At that point, I'm out. I know exactly where he stands.
All right, let me play this live. Play a couple more cuts here. All right, and this is the part that you've been alluding to throughout the show at the earlier part, Leo. This is Bill Mayer.
So interesting, the wrinkle in this story, because now that they're communist, there's an opening for socialism. And you know who's filling it? Donald Trump. Donald Trump. How else do you explain a 9.9 stake in Intel by the government? Is that not socialism? NVIDIA, we took 15% cut when we let them sell chips to China. Nippon Steel, that's merged with U.S. Steel. We have a golden share. We basically run their boardroom now. And you know this is socialism, I think, because Bernie Sanders agrees with it all.
Oh, yeah.
He wants to do it with the AI companies.
The free market is dead. They have decided that the government wants to control 30 different companies. And Intel alone, which was a loser because of NVIDIA, they basically own 9.9% of that company. And that's a lot. And President Trump, after they invested in this company, he then went on to buy stocks in NVIDIA, which shot up 200%. Okay, so he actually made a ton of money on this. His government created a floor on a stock that he owns. It's crony capitalism, too.
It's crony capitalism.
It's
seizing literally the means of production. Because let's remember how these things happen. How did Intel happen? Right? 1 year ago today, Donald Trump was out there saying, we need to maybe fire the CEO of Intel because I think he's a Chinese spy. It's like, what? The president is just singling out a huge CEO of an important company. And so they had to scramble the jets and have a meeting at the White House. And what happened at the end of that meeting? Okay, you stay. We get 10% of your company. That is thuggish behavior. We have never seen anything like this in modern times.
Emil, we'll start with you on that, your response.
So that can of worms was opened, poured out in the 2008 crisis. And that's not the first time America's bailed out. We can go back to when Lee Iacocca was the CEO of Chrysler in the early 80s, and Chrysler needed to be bailed out by the federal government. The federal government has bailed out companies for decades. This is not new behavior. What's new is when we take an ownership stake in those companies without necessarily those kinds of deals. We had a stake in AIG when we bailed them out in 2008. So this is not new in terms of taking a stake. I am not a big fan of the government doing this. And the reason why is because I do believe in creative destruction. Yes, there will be some short-term pain as people lose their jobs, but the vacuum will be filled if you let capitalism do its work. The problem is that you have this crony capitalism where companies are being bailed out because they're too big to fail, because they're too important, not letting the system called free enterprise work its magic to fill the voids that these cratering companies will create. And the problem is bad behavior is being rewarded every single time this happens, including in this current era where the president is taking stakes in companies and he's not being challenged in court over it. I have a huge problem with that because it's only reinforcing bad behavior. And no, the president is not personally owning the stake, but I have a feeling that if we were to look at the books, somehow he's profiting, and not just by buying stocks that he is able to influence, but there are other mechanisms that, in play. And I think all of this is a reflection of the era where we are no longer in a state or a system that rewards good behavior and punishes bad behavior economically.
So, Leo, do you agree that this is, if I heard Emil correctly, and I may not have, But hey, this has been done before to the extent that it's not unprecedented, because that's what Bill.
It's not unprecedented if you believe in Joseph Stalin, the Russian dictator who in 1928 did some of the same things, right? And had a 5-year plan to make sure that Russia seized the production arms, and now we're dealing with a Putin because of that. So if you want America to go the way of Putin, then let's stay on this path. Seizing the control of production and that kind of thing. Yes, Trump is doing that. There's no doubt about it. It is a problem. And part of the reason it's a problem is because we have not comfortably found the type of capitalism and free market enterprise that people can believe in. We haven't educated people well, and we haven't shared it. We have not shared capitalism and free market opportunity in a way that people can believe in a more moral, just, and shared cooperative capitalism. We have that work to do. I, as a conservative who believes in capitalism, have to do that because Joseph Stalin lost, and we don't want to lose as Americans.
Leo, I agree. And this is probably something that when I look back at history, Stalin did it really quickly. Mao did it really quickly, right? Seizing the means of production. And this is a very slow crawl that we're seeing in the current era. But the real problem is that capitalism doesn't seem to be working. In 1980, during the race for president, Reagan talked about trickle-down economics. George H.W. Bush called it at the time voodoo economics, because it's like magic how money would go to the top and then somehow magically float down to the bottom. Where you see capitalism and the government working best, believe it or not, is when you were in the 50s and 60s and you had that 90% notional tax rate. People weren't paying 90% taxes. What they were doing was reinvesting in order to avoid that high marginal tax rate of 90%. That was socialist, but what was happening was people were investing in America, and America was growing, and people were growing their fortunes. But that wasn't trickling down. That was actually supporting the American worker, and the money was trickling up.
So thank you, Emil. But I want to challenge you on one thing. That's not a critique of capitalism that you made. That's a critique of taxation policy that you just made. In other words,
I agree. Yeah.
Right. So capitalism has great ability to create a system that lots of people can thrive. There's no system, I think, that can be created that everybody's going to thrive equally. That's just not nature. That's not nature. But the fact is that even as a conservative, even as I who grew up learning about political conservatism from the Reagan, that I was 16 years old when Reagan went into office. So the point is that we have given so much tax break to the elite rich on both sides. Both sides have, right? And so therefore we have created a corrupted element within capitalism. So this taxation issue where we allow them to find loopholes, not pay their fair share, always get out of the responsibility for a cooperative commonwealth, a commonwealth republic. Because we haven't done that, that's corrupting our idea of capitalism and making people feel negative about it. But absolutely, we need to stop believing in just give the rich people more ability to use their money however they want to, and they'll trickle it down. No, that does not work.
So let me ask you something, Leo, with that, because to a degree, I would offer, and here's let me see if we can get some agreement. I think we all understand, or at least have some understanding of how Citizen United, in a sense, hurts our capitalistic system. I almost went to find one of the first videos I said when I told people how I became an independent. One of them, at the time, trying to understand more politics, one of my biggest issues was Citizen United being put in place. I've actually learned some history to even get a better understanding of why it was put in place. Believe it or not, y'all probably understand this better than I do. The reason why actually is a lot more altruistic than when I first learned about it through propaganda. When I first learned about Citizens United through propaganda, I wasn't aware of, in a sense, the altruistic reasons why it was put in place. But even in the altruistic reasons that it was put in place, those who understood it and was putting it in place also understood what we're seeing now was part of the risk. At that point, we would have to count on good moral politicians to balance that out, if you will. And obviously, we've lost to the money being put in, and we get more corruptions because the amount of money is put in. But anyway, I say all that to say this, that Lee, I'll ask you, in a sense, I would offer that currently, for the last, since the Reagan years, I would offer that I've come to understand what Reagan was leaning into was supply side economics, which theoretically looks beautiful theoretically, but there is a real world example of it truly succeeding in the period since Reagan when you look at what's happened since Reagan. So I'm just curious, how do you, in a sense, you as a conservative stay on that side when the results have been bad for the economy overall for the majority of Americans?
I'm not sure what side you're speaking of, Montoya. Citizens United, right, was Supreme Court ruling in 2000 that said that basically corporations should, or people who are building a large, massive amount of spending on political processes, on politicians, on supporting their campaigns with, unfettered money, that they should be allowed to have that freedom to do that. That's one thing. I guess the connection that you're trying to make on that is you correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to put words in your mouth, is that when Citizens United law was created, then therefore the influence of money on a politician's desire to then therefore always benefit the elite rich. Okay, but how does that change if Citizens United didn't exist? That influence over politicians being corrupt and taking money and then therefore creating policy. I'm a lobbyist, right? So there's, to an extent, I don't give out millions of dollars, but I'm still able to influence people, right? That influence is always going to happen. So what I would say is that, again, you're trying to say, let's reduce the amount of influence the corporate elites can have to have unbridled power and under the ground, dark money, etc. I get it. You're saying make it harder to cheat, make it harder to be corrupt.
Yeah, I'm not naive to the fact that the influence has always been there, and that's no matter what system you have. There's no time, no history, no point in the world. I should say no point. When everybody was egalitarians and all that kind of stuff prior to civilizations, I'll say. But since civilization, you're always going to have that influence. So I'm not naive to that. But yeah, us structuring it to the extent that you have this unfettered amount of money is a big issue. And the other question to you was that as a conservative, you end up supporting the policies that lead to what we're experiencing more so than liberal.
Well, the corporate elite power structures are supporting a set of policies that legislators are kowtowing to, right? Absolutely. As conservatives, I don't support that. And most conservatives don't. They just don't have the power to go tell NVIDIA that what you're doing with Donald Trump is illegal and is wrong and damages capitalism. I just don't have that much bandwidth, right? But I don't believe in that happening. So what's happening is that, yes, we need to figure out a way to reduce the corporate cabal from working with misaligned politicians on either side. And we need to figure out how to reduce that. But we have to reduce it without limiting American freedom to support political candidacies. So I think it is worthy of a conversation as to, is Citizens United the only problem there? Or is it also just the amount of an accountability measure? Do the people need to rise up and say, if taxation does not lead to a better operation of capitalism in a way that supports more people in our commonwealth, then we need to stop giving those kinds of tax breaks. I think that we're getting closer and closer to people saying, okay, I'm willing to. Yeah, go ahead.
So can I say what you're saying right now? That part to me is not tied to Citizens United. I'm just saying your party seems to push the policies that lead to the taxation not having more of a fair.
Because my party has fallen into the trap of being cultural lemmings.
Okay.
So invested in the cultural war on their side, on our side, the cultural lemming, meaning the white nationalist movement kind of stuff. They're so invested in that the corporate elites that are pushing this influence in government for their own benefit, they're willing to allow that to happen. Why do you think that from a Zuckerberg to a Bill Gates, people who used to be considered progressives and Democrats, they are also siding with some of this crazy stuff that Trump is doing. Right. Why? Because all they care about are their profits and their earnings. That is a problem, whether you're a progressive liberal or you're a MAGA conservative. But do you have the balls and the strength to fight against it? That's the question. And Americans need to rise up and take over their job of making sure that Congress reports to us. We are failing in that way. So Trump is like, hey, they're letting me do it, so I'm going to do it. And Bill Gates and Zuckerberg and all of them are saying, hey, we can turn little children and their brains into places that we go and rape and pillage, and we can get away with it and make trillions. And nobody's doing anything. We need to push back against it.
Now, good stuff. And let me play this last clip here. And this is referencing some of what you were talking about when you said this, when you make the reference to Stalin. You're so brilliant. You kind of like been anticipating the whole show with some of your thoughts, Leo. And this has nothing to do with Stalin, but this is something I know Emil definitely will be concerned about. And I need both of y'all to tell me if y'all think this guy's accurate. CFH Unfiltered is the page. Typically, when I played him on here, y'all consider him to be accurate. So obviously, if y'all see anything wrong with what he says, please let me know that as well.
Here in the United States, we have taken the necessary and essential action of formally recognizing left-wing violence as a form of political terrorism that is a direct threat to our national security and the survival of our Republican form of government. President Trump issued a directive, in our parlance, it's called a National Security Presidential Memorandum, or NSPM, NSPM 7 to be exact.
It is beginning. Shortly before that speech was given, 15 protesters were arrested under a counterterrorism memo entitled NSPM 7. And not a single one of those protesters has been charged with a terrorist-related crime. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The defense attorney for those protesters just filed a motion for discovery. And what's inside that motion should concern every single freedom-loving American. Earlier this year, the Department of Homeland Security ran a sweeping, unauthorized spying campaign on American citizens in Minnesota. And they called it, get this, Operation Puppet Master. Oh, it gets worse. Undercover agents posing as protesters without any authorization or criminal predicate infiltrated churches, libraries, labor unions, protest groups, and private signal chats. And if you're thinking, there's no way it could get worse, oh, it does. They also secretly pulled the private financial records of the largest labor unions in the United States of America, the SEIU and the CWA, because they wanted to know what political groups they were donating to. And they didn't find anything illegal, of course, because the point isn't to find criminals, it is to silence dissent and to spy on the protected political activity of Donald Trump's political enemies. So do not forget to vote this midterm election. Love you guys.
Leo, I'll start with you. In a sense, as the public, myself being part of that public, sometimes we get tired of hearing this is the most important election we've ever had. And I just always make sure that I listen to left and right radio stations, and they're both sounding the alarm. And I would always tell both of you guys is when I listen to either side, I actually understand why the people listening believe what they believe if you follow most of the propaganda, because there's so much propaganda in how they're presenting their sides. So people on one side are like, how can somebody think this way or believe this way? I'm like, Actually, if you listen to it, you would actually understand. Like I literally understand. And so I say all that to say that what CFH Filter is pointing out is stuff that we typically don't pay attention to. And if he's right, that's a very serious problem. Anything, Leo, that you agree or disagree with in what that he pointed out? And he is highlighting the alarm of how important it is to vote. But if we don't understand it from the perspective you just gave us prior to the clip, we're just going to be on a side and still not pay attention. That's the risk.
No, no doubt. I mean, look, the fact is that every election is the most important election because every election leads to another set of ideas, zeitgeist, ways of thinking, ways of believing, case in points that lead us to yet another election. So every election is important. And then one thing that does trickle down is that those people who have enough money and dollars to influence the polities thinking, that trickles down into us accepting new standards over how. And so one of the standards that we're starting to accept, both on the right and on the left, is the yielding to an autocracy. Oh, I'm too much busy having fun on social media to think for myself, to do the research, to go listen to a hard show like Politically Conscious. I'd rather listen to shits and giggles on some comedy show than to actually have people, dealing with stuff in a real nuanced way. That's too hard. I want the easy, fun, laughing stuff. And that is a problem with Americans' education system, which ought to exist outside of politics, etc., which is why I believe in a huge amount of education reform. And sometimes I say pretty drastic things about related to education, like I did the last time I was on your show when I was talking about will HBCUs step up and be what they ought to be, as an academic university. So the point is that this is a problem that, again, we the people have to assert the standard. And I'm not sure that we know how to push back against the state anymore. Republicans and conservatives used to be very anti-statism. Progressive socialists sometimes would say the government, Chris Rock used to have that little joke, the government is your daddy. Well, it was a joke because we don't really want the government to be our daddy. And when you say the government can be your daddy, then you open the door for complete, I still have access to my son and my daughters, some of their stuff that I pay for. If I pay for it, I can see it, I can access it, I can control it. So if you want the government to be your daddy, that's what you're asking for. And I don't think we're ready for that. We don't really want that.
Emil, your thoughts?
So there's a old saying out of
if I can direct you real to kind of back to the clip first, just to kind of say, because that seemed alarming. I don't know much.
It is alarming.
But again, CFH Filter, he usually puts out accurate information from what I can tell. But I know you would know better than me.
It is incredibly accurate information, and the civil liberties that this administration has been trampling on is not unprecedented. You can go back to COINTELPRO from the 1950s and 60s, see the parallels. The problem is in this era, it's arbitrary. And I say that not because it was good in the past. It's just like right now it's arbitrary. The president says, and these things happen. And the problem is that we're not seeing people, the people we're seeing resist. And this is a problem America's had for most of its existence, starting with the Boston Tea Party. And I hate to go back that far, but we're born out of protest. That's the nation we live in. It was born out of the Boston Tea Party. It was born out of revolutionaries who bucked against the system. We can talk about the history, the true history, and the way that the founding framers, the founders of the nation, were thinking. But the bottom line is, without violent revolution, this country wouldn't exist. The same thing throughout all of the major transitions this country has had have come through people protesting and resisting. So when you have an administration that is clearly trying to stifle that, and you had it in Nixon, you had it with Reagan, you had it with Carter. When you have an administration that's trying to stifle dissent, you run the risk of making the people who are supposed to keep this country on track the enemy of the state for reasons political versus reasons practical. It's one thing to protest nonviolently, putting 250,000 people in front of the Lincoln Memorial without a riot, without a fight, is an amazing accomplishment. But if you put 2,500 people in Minneapolis in the summer of 2020 and they start burning down stuff, or the people, the agitators in that group use that as cover to burn down stuff, which is what really happened, proven in court, then you have another problem. And so this administration is conflating all of that and saying any dissent in any form that we don't like is bad. That is awful for
And
the
that's
American
the gateway to what Leo was saying. We're opening the gateway to the auto.
That's correct.
And unfortunately, here's the scary data. Here's the reason why I joined the efforts with, a sort of more left-leaning Carter Center, President Jimmy Carter's, to create the Democracy Resilience Project. Because I was looking at data from both conservative think tanks as well as progressive think tanks that was showing that there's always been a long trend of progressive liberals who believed in autocracy. There's always been that trend because they believe more in the state. Conservatives used to be heavily against that, right? So, but what we saw was with the advent of Trump, he didn't cause this, but because of the desire to prop up white supremacy, so to speak, and playing on the white cultural fears, white conservatives started to say they believed in autocracy. That scared the bejesus out of me as a conservative. So I'm like, well, who are the people who believe in liberty and freedom anymore? Because white conservatives are saying, if I lose power just because I'm white, then I'd rather have an autocrat. Oh my God. And that's how we're in this place now, where we have elements in both sides, right and left, that believe in autocracy. And it is so scary.
It goes back to on the piece I read last week, Emil, what he's talking about now. My piece, Donald Trump is Captain America, in my book, Re-Education of the Negro. It goes exactly to that. All right, Emil, close us out, brother.
You want me?
Yeah, close us out. Yeah, close us out.
Yeah.
Brother.
So look, Leo, you are sounding an alarm in the right way. These are things that can be verified, they can be studied, and they can be corroborated. And why this is important is because we're no longer talking about politics of this or that. We're talking about, does the America we're inheriting or giving to our children the America that we thought was worthy of saving? Because right now, there's a bunch of people on both sides who are wondering if America is even worth the effort. And they're stepping away from politics. They're stepping away from protesting. And they're doing what Leo was talking about. They're burying their head in games. They're burying their head in social media. They're burying their head. And the unfortunate news is 90 million voters didn't choose to vote for a reason. And what Leo's bringing up, what I'm bringing up, and what you're bringing up is that it's just like, is it just one bird with two different wings? Or is it truly a vision of America that I can jump in and be excited about? And what we're saying, and what I think you said very well, Montoya, and other shows, and today included, without us participating, it is what someone else tells it is.
And people miss that. You see me battle even guests I've brought on mental dialogue with the concept of bowing out as a decision and stuff like that. And it's like, if you own, like the example I'll give for our community is, and I'm probably going to deal with this conversation on the next mental dialogue, but I'll say it here because it's fitting in this moment and we'll close out. But there's this concept of how well our community was doing prior to integration. Like there are absolute black enclaves that were doing their thing prior to integration. So that's a reality. But I watched this one sister recently talk about it, and she kind of convoluted the idea of how the highways would get built through some of the enclaves. And the reason I say she convoluted it is because some of her drive was to push to be that way again.
Uh-oh.
Ooh. Montoya, I'm not so sure. Emil is gone, and I can't hear your audio. I don't know if your audience can. I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, I can't hear you. I can't hear you, Montoya.
So Emil can hear me. I can hear Emil, but we can't hear you.
Right. So we're gonna finish
Maybe
up.
we wrap it
Montoya,
up.
thank you for all of this. Was a great show. Leo, thank you. This was a great show. This is where we are. We are trying to unpack all of the noise so that our listeners, our viewers, can really participate in a healthy conversation about the future of this nation. But it's full of propaganda. So what we're always going to say, Leo and Montoya, if you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us. We're out here.